Hey, hi everybody. I am Rebecca Green. I'm the founder of Dear Producer. And as people are kind of still joining in, we'll just jump in and get started. I'm happy to welcome you all here on the last Saturday of the festival. I hope everyone's been watching movies, and we have a really great lineup this year. I have nothing to do with it. They have a really great lineup this year, and I hope you've been enjoying the films. I want to thank our sponsor, Genuine Article Pictures, who has allowed me to grow Dear Producer a lot faster than I expected. And we will have some new things and some big announcements coming this year that has been made possible with this partnership. So I can look forward to some new things in 2022 from us. We have a group of incredible producers here today, and I want to first just call out all the awards they won last night. Nikkia produced Nanny, which won the US Dramatic Competition Grand Jury Award. Keith produced I Didn't See You There, which won the Directing Award. Ina produced Fire of Love, which won the John Oppenheimer Editing Award, and Amanda won the Sundance Institute Amazon Studios Producer Award for Fiction. So hats off to all of you guys. Quite an impressive group here today. And so to kind of kick us off, what I'd love to do is for you each to introduce yourselves, the film that you had at the festival. If you could just give like a little brief kind of quick summary of how you became involved in the film. And I would also like to know how many years it took from when you came onto the film to this festival premiere moment. And so Nikkia, I'd love to start with you.
Yes. Again, yes, my name is Nikkia. I'm a New York-based producer and I produced Nanny. I would say, we started more firmly focusing at least on Nanny in 2019. So this is the 2019? Yeah, it's the fourth year of kind of the journey, and it will continue. The director and I met through mutual friends, and our tastes originally aligned. And we did the first project we did together was a short, Suicide by Sunlight, which was a great experience. And we just align. It's so great working with Nikkia Tujusu, and the journey continues.
Amanda, you want to jump in?
Sure. So I produced God's Country. It's hard for me to remember when I first came on board this project. It was at least 3 years ago, definitely at least 2019, possibly 2018. Got the script through one of the other producers, Haley Bernard, who I had worked with, someone she had previously worked with on another project. And they were like, you have to read the script. And then the script blew me away. And so came on board that project. I guess this project like 3.5 years ago, maybe. And we shot part of it in 2020 and part of it in 2021 because we got shut down before we finished. So it's really hard to keep track of time.
Keith, you want to jump in?
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here. So I'm Keith Wilson. I'm the producer of I Didn't See You There, and I am in Atlanta, Georgia. And I got involved with the project really early on. Reed, who's the director, had shot some footage that he didn't know if it was going to be a film, was sort of test footage, he shot it as a result of a bad date. I'll let him tell that story. But he had put together this sample reel, I think you could call it, of some of the footage that actually did make it into the final film, and some of the voiceover, some iterations of the voiceover that also made it into the final film. And he just said, like, do you want to look at this thing I'm working on? And I watched it in his apartment, and it just like completely floored me. And I felt like, I don't want to say that I knew that the film would end up at Sundance because nobody knows that, but I just felt like, oh, this is really something, and it's something that I want to exist in the world as a film, and it's something that makes me feel alive and excited about filmmaking and documentary filmmaking. So I agreed to produce, and that was probably, it was right before the pandemic. We got lucky because it was relatively easy to shoot because it was Reed who shot and sound recorded everything. So there was some production that happened during that. And now here we are.
Lovely. Welcome, Sabrina. Sorry for those technical issues. We're happy to have you. We're just doing intros and a little bit about how you came to the film. And I'm asking how many years you've been involved on the project. And so, Ina, do you want to pick it up next?
Yes, I have to say Fire of Love, hi Sabrina, is a bit of an unusual situation for me. I've been producing documentaries for close to 30 years, and we all know how long it takes to make a documentary film. But we actually started this film in the spring of 2020. Sarah Dosa and my producing partner, Shane Boris, and I, from a very early stage, started to work with Sandbox Films, who supported us in development. And then we're so happy with what they saw that we went into production right away. Now it's an unusual film because it's an archive-based film. So of course, the development period involves securing the rights to the archives, which I did because I speak French. And the archives are based in a small archive place called Image Est in Nancy in France. So it was a very unusual process for a documentary film to go into production so early, but it was actually in a very strange way the perfect pandemic film. It was all about the research, the editing, the animation, a lot of things you could do without going into the field. We actually had one day of shooting, which is just some of the inserts, which nobody even notices because they look like archives. So it was a very, very quick process, but a very intense process. We had 2 editors and at 1.3 editors working on the film. And as you mentioned, Erin and Jocelyn won the editing award at Sundance this year. Their work is extraordinary, and they basically moved to San Francisco to work with Sarah on the film. So a very short process for a doc, but a very intense process and a wonderful, wonderful collaboration with the team and our partners at Sandbox Films, who are our EPs on the project. They were just phenomenal.
Nice. Sabrina, are you okay to join?
She disappeared.
There she is.
I'm muted too. Can you hear me now?
It's okay. It's all right.
I'm sorry.
It's been a long week.
I'm so sorry. There's a storm today, and my ceiling was about to cave in, and so I had to have a friend come. Anyway, and I just had to turn off the radiator is making a bunch of noise, and I didn't want you to hear.
We appreciate you being here despite the chaos.
Yes, so sorry about that. And then I had trouble logging in. Okay, anyway, so my name is Sabrina Schmidt-Gordon. I am a documentary filmmaker, producer, and editor primarily. My film is To the End. It's about the fight for the Green New Deal from the perspective of 4 young women of color. It premiered last Sunday, and the director is Rachel Lears, who made Knock Down the House. I have been on the project. She started filming in 2018. I met her about a year in, 2019, and I've been on the project since then. Do you want me to talk about, I know we have certain questions. I don't know.
No, that's good for now. We're gonna jump around. I mean, I think most people are here, to kind of get the tea on the last minute switch to virtual. And I think that, so I kind of want to just hear from everybody. Obviously we recognize how hard it is for festivals and making these decisions in this pandemic and with big events, and everyone has an opinion on what they should or shouldn't have done. And so I'm curious to hear from each of you, what your experience was. I know just from friends, it really was a last minute, announcement for all of you as well. And so what was that, pivot like? How did that adjust what you were doing? Kind of, there's the obvious ways, but maybe some of the non-obvious ways that everyone isn't thinking about. How did you have to scramble? What do you feel was lost? Was there anything gained in going virtual, aside from safety and health concerns? And so I would love for each of you to kind of go through and talk about that experience. Amanda, do you want to start us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the first most obvious ones was like a huge loss of money to like for all of the accommodations and everything that had been booked. So, you know, I mean, I feel like we could have shot a film for the amount of money that we lost with the with all of that. So that was kind of a big deal, and was trying to be sort of cautious about booking to begin with the idea that maybe this could happen. But, you know, when you're only a couple weeks out, you kind of got to go for it. And also things are more expensive when you book that late. So then you're like spending more money to book that late because you tried to be cautious, and then you just end up losing more money than maybe if you had booked months earlier. So that was a problem. And then it was also like we were finishing the film up until the last minute. So we were coloring like the week we were supposed to deliver. But then you're sort of switching, like you have to, because it was a hybrid to begin with, we would still have to deliver things in a certain way, but we then had to pivot our focus because we had been focusing on having a theatrical, you know, movie and experience and that color space and that sound and all of that. And then having to switch to, okay, no, now this is all virtual. So it's like just the technical aspects of that are slightly different, and had to redeliver the film to Sundance 3 times. Like our movie wasn't on the platform until 5 hours before it premiered. So that was very nerve-wracking because it kept being, we were submitting it very last minute and it kept going up wrong. And we didn't know that it was going up wrong. So it was, you know, I felt like the premiere for me ended up being like a tech check with like checking the mat, and I had a post-it note in each corner of my television to like make sure the proper file went up, because there was no technical check. So that was tough. And just, you know, losing the ability to actually all celebrate together is obviously, you know, really hard. Although I feel like more people on the team got to see the movie because of this, because there were going to be plenty of people who didn't get to come to Park City, and they actually got to see the movie where they wouldn't have been able to see the movie otherwise.
Yeah, I can attest to her. She was sending me notes of her uploads, or texts of her uploads last night. I wasn't thinking about that the delivery would have been completely different as well. Yeah, Keith, do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, it's so interesting because Sundance is over, and I think I didn't quite have time to process mostly loss. Like I feel like there's a sense of loss of being with the team. There's a sense of seeing our film in the theater with other human beings. The film is a very experiential and raw and works. I've seen it one time in a theater at a test screening at MOMI back in February, or sorry, the fall. And I know most films and most filmmakers, you know, say and think, and they're probably right, that the films sort of work better. And I really believe that with this one, and still do. And I'm really looking forward to our in-person. So that was hard, just sort of like a team personal loss. I was lucky enough to get our money back for our hotel after speaking with like 5 managers and their managers. I was like determined to not lose all of that money, which we could have shot a very nice short film for. So that was hard. I think we also tried to sort of think, I think we were also with Cinetic, who is our sales agent, we were thinking that, you know, the theatrical would be really important. This film, we feel like, is a filmmaker's film, and Sundance is the place to premiere a film like that because people see it, they talk about it, they talk about it with other people. That sort of word of mouthness felt really important for our film. And we still didn't quite get that. And I think we tried to think about how to sort of pivot and think differently about our approach to sales and buyers, publicity, et cetera. And I'm not quite sure we had time or the experience to kind of quite do that. So that was a real learning experience, that I honestly hope I don't ever have to do again. Maybe just in preparation for a virtual only festival, but this preparing for in-person and pivoting was for me really hard on a emotional and producer sort of what is my words? It's the end of the week and I'm so exhausted. Just in sort of a basic detailed pivot was also really hard. Yeah.
Nikkia, do you want to jump in, as you know, this was your kind of first feature, big fancy premiere, so your expectations, this, you know, maybe didn't have them the same way going in as somebody who had done it before. What was your experience like?
Well, I think that just to piggyback a little bit off of what Keith just said, actually, I think with a film like Nanny, you know, with the last minute pivot, we kind of had to get out and try to get our director out there to kind of place people in what this was and what it wasn't. It put the onus on us to really lean into, you know, our publicity team to help us kind of level set for the audience. So, which they did beautifully, you know, Ryan Werner, we also are working with Cinetic, by the way, too. But, you know, with a film like ours, because it was such a melding of genres and people love their boxes in this industry, you know, it was tough. I mean, the biggest loss for us, in addition to not being together, was really not having the word of mouth and being in a room with a bunch of people experiencing that film. Now, mind you, yes, we've won an amazing award. So I know certain people will be like, let's take this with a grain of salt. But I mean, it's just, there's nothing like screening and that experience. You know, we had done this amazing mix and, you know, the visual effects and laptops are great and televisions are great, but there's nothing like that experience in the dark watching a film with a bunch of people. And so I think that we really had to stretch muscles that, you know, we hadn't stretched before, this being both of our first time, my director and I. And we totally rose to the challenge, but that was really the challenge for us. Like, okay, so we're not gonna be up on a mountain together in a bubble with cinephiles who'll get it. So how do we set the scene for people? Okay, press, let's just do it. You know, so that was the real kind of, that was the puzzle.
Yeah. Ina?
Well, I have to say, like, I think we were all, in a weird way, trying to plan for both eventualities, because, you know, we were working with Submarine and Cinetic as well as our publicist, and of course, Sandbox. And so I think in the back of our minds, as you know, as time went on, we're thinking, maybe this will become virtual. So, you know, Submarine, being the phenomenal sales agents that they were very smart. They had booked 2 screening rooms, one in New York and one in LA, so that our film could be seen by buyers on a screen, which, you know, was super, super important for Fire of Love, given the visual language that Sarah uses in the film. So I think we were very fortunate at least to have had that plan. But of course, there was that emotional moment, which I'm sure everyone here experienced, when you go, oh my God, like, we're not going to Park City and we're not having our big party with the industry that we were planning, and we're not all going to be together. I mean, our archive house was in France. 2 people were supposed to come. Our musician, Nicolas Godin, his manager, were supposed to come. A good number of my team from Montreal were supposed to come. So everything changed very quickly. The other thing that I thought was really nice is that all of us ended up, like, I'm in LA for part of the year, even though I live in Montreal most of the time. And my producing partners here, Sarah Dosa came down, our editors were here, our, you know, Sandbox came. So we ended up having an in-person screening, which was such a gift to all of us, to be able to see the film, one screening with an audience, and be able to celebrate together. So I'm very thankful that Sandbox pivoted and was able to make this happen. But it was a fast pivot, I have to say. Like, you go from this moment of like, holy shit, we're not going to Park City. What does that mean? To, okay, what are we going to do? And I think that's a lesson learned about this precarity of what we do, which we know from the production side, but now going into year 2, year 3 of a pandemic, we've learned a lot, and we've learned how we really, even on the distribution side, have to have a variety of expectations for our films.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, everything that everyone has said is like resonated with me. I'm thinking about the money, that was a really big deal in terms of our accommodations, particularly because we were bringing out the cast, we were bringing out some of our crew, and then we were also our core team. So I had 3 properties that I had to negotiate getting money back. And I remember when, as Omicron was like sort of, mounting, or for lack of a better word or whatever, I'm thinking, are they going to cancel? Are they going to cancel? And I kept putting off making final payments. I kept asking for extensions and extensions because I was thinking, it's going to have to get canceled, and I didn't want to have to haggle for that much, like all of that money back, And I actually made the final payments hours before they announced that it was going virtual. Hours. Because by that date, I was like, obviously, I guess they're not canceling. So yeah. I did it. It was just like, I can't tell you what that felt like. Hours later, I get a text. Actually, I got a text from someone saying, did you hear that they're maybe going to cancel? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then right after that, the announcement came out. Fortunately, though, like Keith, I actually managed to get a lot of it back, most of it back, actually. And that was really important because, we are, we're part of our funding is grant funding, and you know how hard won that is. Like, it's just like, I just couldn't bear it. I was like, I have to make like whatever effort I can, make whatever pleas that I can to like, make ourselves as whole as I could financially. Also, I think it was particularly disruptive for us, and I totally like relate with what Amanda was saying, that we were still making our film up until the last minute. I don't know if you've seen the film, but without giving anything away, we were actually waiting for something that needed to happen for our film to have its final scene. So we were filming to the last minute, and then so our edit was tight. And then for this to be happening, and then, some folks got COVID, and that also delayed our post schedule, because at the last minute, like our colorist and other folks got COVID. So like, so it was just really the upheaval and the disruption is really, it was, very much those things, disruptive in pretty significant ways. There was something else I wanted to say about so in terms of being in person, so of course, like, we miss out on all of that, and we're all, and I was so happy with the spaces that I found and all this stuff. I was like, oh, this is so well coordinated, we're gonna have like such a great time. And then it's like, damn it, I've been, every time like I go to Sundance, I try to improve my like housing game, like where I want to stay, where I want to be located, like how I want to strategize. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. And then like, it didn't happen. So in terms of pivoting, like for the virtual, what I found, now that the film is over, and this is the first time I'm having a film as a filmmaker in a virtual festival. In the past, I mean, I've seen films, but I didn't have a film. So it was a very different experience. And I really appreciate the folks who, like, especially like even in the first, like the first years who had to premiere their films online, that it is really difficult. It's very hard to feel connected, and I think, the festivals make their best efforts with the virtual spaces and things like that. But we're coming to an end, and it felt more like you said, like it was technical. Like I wanted to make sure everything was just like working, and yeah, it didn't really feel like a premiere in a certain kind of way. So you don't get that, like, I feel like I had all this adrenaline going and doing all this work, and it's like, it has nowhere to go, like, because it doesn't feel fully like complete. A friend of mine says, like, you don't have closure. So that was interesting, because I didn't quite expect that. And I'll say quickly, like in terms of how to like try to build audience, one of the good things, of course, is that people who wouldn't have been able to go to Sundance were able to see the film. So that was really great. I wish I had more time to sort of cultivate like our audience in that way and invite more people and things like that. But I was so busy, it was kind of hard to do that as effectively as I would have liked. But one of the things that we did is at the last minute, I worked with I hired a team to help me put together like a watch party so that we could have like a Twitter, like sort of watch party online. And we made like these really cool assets and like blasted it all over social media and stuff like that to try to get the feeling of like we're watching this together. I was so busy, I didn't get to participate in the watch party, but yeah, so that was like one thing that if I had to do it over, I wish I had started planning for that sooner, and instead of like just starting to plan for it when the shift happened. Because
I kept thinking about all the extra work it was putting on producers, the travel. We don't have travel coordinators on these festival premieres, and it's like it is such a big undertaking. And then for all of you guys have to shift and now try to get your money back. Like I kept thinking about that the whole time. And you've all made really good points. I think, this isn't. I personally was disappointed in how it all played out. I did not have a film there or stake in the game, but I feel like, had there been any hesitation on the side of Sundance, they should have made the decision earlier. And like, waiting, I think long was to benefit Sundance. I think it was not to benefit the filmmakers, though there's the argument of like, well, an in-person festival is better for filmmakers. So like it's hard to say. And I don't, we aren't here to like, bash Sundance in any way. All these festivals are going to be up against this. And what I would love to hear from you. Hi, Kara. Thanks for joining. And I'd love to hear from you guys, advice for festivals. What can they be doing better? How should they be prepping? What is the right amount of time if they want to pivot? Like, I don't know how much discourse was happening between Sundance and filmmakers. I think everybody that I was reaching out to me was surprised. And so I just would love if you guys could talk about, because I think virtual is going to stay. I think the pivots are going to stay from like fully in person to not. And I think we're going to be going through having both, which I think honestly is a great thing for independent film. I had a whole Discord with Minette Louie on Twitter about the restrictive windows and what I thought about that as somebody who was just sitting at home. I really wanted them to open up. If you bought a ticket and couldn't watch it during the festival, I wanted them to open up this weekend to like watch anything you had a ticket for and missed, because life gets in the way when you're at home. It's not an event. It's not your focus. And I live alone and don't even have kids, and life still got in the way. And so I just think that there has to be some more thought put into how do we make this work on both sides. And so, big question, but from your experience, what should festivals be thinking about and doing better? Nikkia, do you want to jump in first?
Sure. I mean, you said it, you kind of touched on the point that I found the hardest, and also to explain to all of the crew that now, here's the thing, the minute it became virtual, everyone wanted in, right? As they should. Like everyone wanted a ticket. What's the rules? What's the words? Is there an app? And I think for me, the hardest thing was the window, because when you are in the midst of your life, and our premiere was on a Saturday, it's just like weekends are still sacred. I mean, and during COVID too, I feel like a lot of people started to take weekends, holidays more to heart, like really taking a break and a rest. So I think just rethinking the ticketing and what it actually allows, like a ticket per screening versus a ticket at X time, would probably be like the most generous way to approach it. But also like the flip side of that is, this is also a market. Like we're here to bring our film, roll it out, get it sold. That approach also kind of applied to the, distributors and teams. Like, I mean, a Saturday, I don't know, there were a lot of people who just like, so we had to get ahead of that. And then in hindsight, just the viewing process has to be reassessed if this is really going to be a marketplace. And especially for the smaller films. And it's like, I had a lot of friends who had projects, both shorts and features, that were like, I don't even know who watched yet. Like, and it's kind of the end of the week. Like, we're still chasing, and trying to figure it out. So I think just the viewing experience, both as an audience member and industry, like I think there has to be a new approach in the future, even if it's not strictly virtual. I just think in general, given what's happened in the world, the virtual experience needs a bit more consideration.
Yeah, I bought like 25 tickets. I got through about half of them. I generally would have just spent my whole weekend watching movies. And I think that like the more of us talking about these movies virtually on Twitter to like, I think helps the sales market. Like you can only create so much buzz virtually, but like the general audience isn't, general public isn't necessarily paying attention, but our peers are, critics are, distributors are, like in the film Twitter bubble. And so that was my take of it. Yeah, Ina, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one thing we're not talking about is the fact that it costs a lot less. I don't know about Sundance, but certainly many of the other festivals where they're renting venues and paying staff, it costs a lot less to be virtual for the festival itself. And some festivals, in fact, have upped the game in terms of compensating filmmakers by when they're showing the films virtually. So Hot Docs, for example, made that decision and split the online box office with the producer / filmmaker. And I thought that was a brilliant way of acknowledging, their financial reality too. And, in all transparency, I'm on the board of Hot Docs, quite new, but they're in good financial shape. Like it's been good for festivals as much as nobody's talking about it, this virtual model. I mean, the cost of running an in-person festival is enormous. And this acknowledgement that Hot Docs and others have made to the filmmaker and producer and saying, hey, this is a way of compensating you for your work, I think should be a model for festivals moving forward, because it's a very, very different model than in-person festivals, certainly on a financial level.
Great. Kara, do you want to join in?
Yeah, I just want to jump in. Hi, I'm so sorry I was late, guys.
Okay.
Whatever.
It's
anyway,
that kind of week. It's fine.
It's that kind of week. It's been a Sundance week. I'm actually curious if you talked about this, but like, has Sundance or any other festivals put out numbers of how many tickets they sell virtually versus in person? Because I keep talking about this week, but like, I've never seen more Sundance movies in my life this week than like, I've been to Sundance many years. And I usually see like 3-4 movies because it's the only one you can get a ticket to, that your friend gives you one or you find one. And like, I've been watching 2 movies a day. And so I'm just like curious because it feels like so many more tickets are being sold than like you ever would in person.
Well, while you guys are all talking, I'm sure I have it somewhere. They haven't done this year, but last year Sundance, after the festival, it was like 500,000 tickets sold. Like they were boasting about numbers. And that's part of why I did that festival sustainability survey about what festivals are bringing this back to filmmakers. Like it's just, we're beyond that moment now where if your mission is to support filmmakers, it can't be a one-way street where one side profits and the other doesn't. And it can't just be, it's exposure,
Yeah. It's like college sports now. They're like starting to pay the athletes. It's
yeah,
like
that's a good
yeah.
comparison.
Big sports crowd, I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to chime in on, I actually like the idea of like moving forward if there's always like a virtual component, because it does allow people who can't go to some of the festivals to participate in some way. But in terms of like, you asked, what could have been done better. I think certainly better communication with the film. We should not have been in the dark the way that we were. If they were because obviously by the time the decision was made and announced, conversations were happening. And I just think it was completely, I was actually quite stunned by like I'm sure there are reasons for why, like maybe you don't want a buzz going on, like, oh my God, it might get canceled, or like, you don't want that, but you have to like mitigate certain losses. And maybe that might be a little bit of a problem for you, but like you have to mitigate the risk for like the filmmakers who like, this is a really costly, being traveling and doing all that stuff, like participating in festivals is costly to begin with. And then Sundance, frankly, is quite costly, especially if you're trying to share that with like your participants and with your crew and so on. It is a really exorbitant like expense. So that I found really frustrating. And I think also I wish that there was a little bit more effort, like once it had to pivot to virtual, that there was a little bit more generosity in it. Like for example, like expanding those windows so more people could participate. So if I have a friend who purchased a ticket, especially like not a filmmaker, didn't realize that their window was going to end, like they don't get another chance to watch. And I had to keep explaining to people how it worked technically, and you have to watch it then, and you better watch it by now, and you better start it by this time. Like it was just really overwhelming. We got comps for like our premieres, but we didn't for our second screenings. That would have been nice to be able to share that, like for people who couldn't do the premiere, to have a second option, especially since there's only 2, as opposed to in person where you have more than 2 screenings. So I think things like that, I almost am afraid to see the numbers because it might be really frustrating.
I bet they'll boast about them if they're high.
Yeah. It's also, it's like the money you lose, just to like piggyback, like we lost $20,000 on hotels between our team. And like, that was on the film, like, because we chose to put it on the film because we wanted to like support our actors and our team. And like, we lost a lot of money. And then not only that, I know the filmmakers family, a lot of family was coming in from other countries and other states. And like, obviously this is not on Sundance's fault, but like, yeah, it did happen so abruptly that all of a sudden we had dozens of people writing us being like, hey, I can't get my $5,000 back from this hotel. And like, it was just kind of sad, heartbreaking.
But I do think that that's on Sundance to some extent, because if they were in better communication with us, we could mitigate some of those. We could make informed decisions basically and mitigate some of those potential risks and losses. Because you probably could have talked to folks like, oh, maybe postpone buying the your plane ticket, like your international non-refundable plane ticket, by another week until I have an update for you, or something like that. I think that was,
or that this was a possibility, critical. Like this might be coming, so like maybe hold on.
Yeah, because you missed the part of that part. We talked about that in the conversation, and I was saying, for example, I had 3 3 houses that I had to rent, and I had to book, and I was saying I had the feeling that it might get canceled, but because we kept hearing on the news about all these other things getting canceled, and I'm like, everything was getting canceled except for Sundance. So I kept asking for extensions for my like deposits or final payments and things like that. And it was hours before it was announced that I made my final payment, because I waited that long to do it. So like there should have been better communication. I mean, I think that is, and more support once it happened too. So I'm talking about generosity in terms of ticketing, but also like maybe some support in helping us negotiate getting our money back. And because that's, 20,000, 50,000, and that's a lot of money for an independent project to just.
I found the article. It says Sundance announced record audience in 2021, over 500,000 views. I just put it in the chat.
I think though, like listening to you, definitely, I relate to all of that. And like when you're organizing a team on the ground and you're organizing a virtual team, like that's completely different. It's totally different. And I know most people would have preferred to have the 24-hour window to watch the movie than a 4-hour window to watch the movie. And when you're all gathering at Eccles, like we were like, God's Country was supposed to be on a Sunday night at 8:30, 9:30. Like that's a very different thing than like Sunday night when you're home, like to hit that window. And then, it doesn't feel as urgent to actually see it the first time from a sales perspective, like because distributors are going to get links anyway, or they're going to see it in the theater, whatever it's going to be. It's not the same. So you're not really premiering to the people that you would be catering to if you were on the ground on a Sunday night, which is when our slot was. And not getting any tickets to that second screening, like there were so many people on the team that were like, I'm not, may not even watch it at the premiere because they've already seen the movie and they're watching it alone. It's not the same to watch it in that moment. So then you don't actually need the kind of tickets you need for your online premiere. But like, if you want people to actually see the movie, it's better suited in that 24-hour block than it is in a 4-hour block. So, but it's like, it's just such a different strategy than if you're, plus it's like you don't need +1s on a premiere ticket.
Yeah.
Like you never have enough tickets for your premiere when you're in person, but I don't, like, people don't need +1s if they're all sitting in the same room watching it at home. So like you should be able to spread those out and pick and choose when people get to see it. It's just such a different way of looking at a premiere. So that have more time to even just make those changes would have been nice. But just in general, I think like festivals should definitely, if there's a virtual component, like be more flexible in the way things are windowed and ticketed and organized, because you don't gather the same way. Our virtual premiere, our virtual party was Tuesday night after our second screening, because no one's logging in for a virtual premiere on a Sunday at midnight, but then no one joined on Tuesday either. So it was like me, the DP, the production designer, and the director like just did it for fun, but nobody in the room had seen the movie. So, you know, so you're not really gathering or talking about the movie when most of the people in the room didn't even have tickets. They just had Spaceship, like they had New Frontier tickets, like a pass, but they didn't actually see any movies. So it was like such a different, it's a totally different vibe, and you got to make adjustments for that.
Keith, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. This all resonates with me. And I guess I'm just sitting here thinking about like, I mean, I guess just personally, I said before this winter came that I was going to be prepared for another winter during the pandemic and just assume that I will have limited, you know, things will sort of shut down and I'll have to be at home and I'm going to get a lot of stuff done this winter. And I guess I'm just thinking about like what Sundance could or should do next year. And I just feel like it doesn't quite make sense to even plan a festival next year. I mean, I don't know, that seems crazy, but like during the winter in a mountain town, like the only place that feels right to plan a festival in January next year, given what we know about the pandemic, is Los Angeles, because it's outdoors, you can have space. I mean, and not to say that if the next film that I produce gets into Sundance that I wouldn't want to screen it virtually, but I think I would need to think about it. And I guess I kind of would want that choice too, because yeah, I never really considered pulling the film from this film festival, but to have in deciding where we're going to premiere, I think it is important for me to premiere things in person, because the types of films I make really rely on in-person experiences and word of mouth. And I guess I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, but I'm just thinking about the future and thinking about festivals that happen in the winter where it's cold feel not like a good idea moving forward, quite frankly. Like at first when Tribeca moved to the summer, and I know that I know that it's in January and it starts the film festival, you know, I know it's like part of this bigger ecosystem, which quite frankly could also use some sort of change. But like when Tribeca moved it to the summer, I was thinking like, you know, there was like, oh, now it's going to be at the wrong time of the year. It's just not going to be right for award season next year. But like, it feels like a good idea to me now.
I think that the bigger note you're getting at, which has been my frustration throughout all of this, is there's been slight changes, but essentially everyone's just digging in their heels, waiting for things to go back to normal. I understood that for 2020. 2021, I started to get really frustrated, and now we're doing it again. And so when do these big ideas come into play? When do people realize life has changed? And if we want to support filmmakers, we have to change too. We need radical change, big ideas, not going to be easy. And I'm not on the inside. Maybe it's all happening, but we've not seen it, like whoever said, going into year 3. I'd love to just switch gears a little bit. I know you had, you know, the big sale of the festival. Congratulations. Very well deserved with your fantastic movie.
Thank you.
But I'd love for you guys, some of you touched on sales a little bit, but you know, the sales market in general right now in this virtual world, this pandemic world, indie film, how are we all feeling about the future of indie film and sales? Do you want to start us off?
I think I'm gonna lead again. I think
This is the part of the conversation that gets hard. That's why we're going to start with the big success story.
Well,
The
you know, I
unicorn.
mean, listen, we all know, we get our film into Sundance, we all dream of the big sale, and it doesn't happen to most films. You know, Sundance is a wonderful launch point for many films, but it doesn't always translate into a sale. I think Submarine did an extraordinary job, along with our publicity team, by the way. And I can't remember who brought up publicity, but I think I think it may have been Sabrina. I mean, it's so important in this virtual space because we are used to reading online. We're used to following, you know, Twitter. We're used to going on Facebook and reading reviews. And I think having, you know, a great amount of publicity really helped the film. And you can kind of generate the same kind of buzz through PR online as you can in person. And I think we've learned that. I don't know if we expected this kind of sale. We're very grateful. But, you know, now we're thinking, and again, it's all about the long term. What about subsequent festivals? What is that going to mean for the film? What about the rollout of the film? I was involved with a film called Stray. I was the EP. I think it was over a year ago, and we had a wonderful distributor, Magnolia, but we ended up doing pretty much the whole theatrical launch online in a few theaters. So I think we have to look, you know, yes, I'm very grateful for the success, but at the same time, I think all of us are saying, okay, what's next? Because the precarity of our markets in North America and worldwide, and, you know, how people are watching films and who's watching films, and our cinemas opening and closing. I mean, in Montreal right now, cinemas are closed. They've been closed, and they open and close every month or two because of the pandemic. In these States, it's a little different. In France, they shut down as well. So I think, you know, yes, it's a great launch pad. We're very grateful. But I think the big question for all of us is, how do we navigate the next year or two with our own films? I think that's the conversation we need to have.
Nikkia, you want to jump in?
Sorry, I was muted. Well, I guess I need like a little more context to the question because Karen.
I mean, like what, you know, I guess for you, like what were sales expectations? What were the conversations, you know, with your team, with sales teams? You know, how did you guys navigate that, especially with this shift?
Got it. You know, I'd say like, I guess for us, mostly it's like, there are like two other comparable films I think that people kept like coupling us with that luckily like had the opportunity to come in already having distribution kind of locked in. And I think for us, really tying to my discussion on my point about how we had to kind of like center people and like ground people and what this is or isn't, I think that, you know, it's just taken some time. I mean, I feel like the big thing that my team kind of prepped us for was just everything is just slower. It's slower to get eyes on the film. It's slower to get feedback on the film. And everyone is going for like the shiny things, you know, like the whatever kind of is the breakout or whatever is what everyone is trying to buy. And I mean, it's just so uninspired, but, and it feels so lazy, but like, that's what it is. And the flip side of that is, which no one really talks about, is that a lot of distributors and streamers now are coming in so early, like they're coming in at production. So when they come to the festival, the slate is slim. Like what they're looking for and what they're open to buying is just so specific. So I think that, you know, I have full confidence and I've had full confidence in my team and my film, but, you know, slow is the word. And, you know, just circling back again, it's just, there was a time where when you're in that bubble, everyone is watching. Like teams are there, they're on the ground, they're spread out, and so they're covering everything. Because it was virtual, even just getting the eyes and getting the notes. Do you know what I mean? It's just like it's all connected. So everything is just slower, but gonna happen. But like it's a long game. It's an even longer game for maybe what would have felt more obvious because the slates are smaller and they're so specific. There's a lot of like, oh my God, this is so great. We were looking for X though, like that one specific bucket that we need to put one film in, so
The
not to
bucket,
give too much
man.
away, but like, yeah, it's just like that window is, it's not wide open. So,
No, that's great information. That's exactly what I was asking. Kara, do you want to jump in on your phone?
Yeah, I'm only laughing because Nikkia and I are friends, obviously, and we've been texting each other throughout this process, and we just are admiring each other's, experiences. So I'm laughing at that. But yeah, I mean, it's exactly what Nikkia said. It's I don't know. It's very funny. Like it's very slow. I have all the faith in the world. Our film is going to find a wonderful home. We feel so lucky. We even like probably have that opportunity. I know some films who don't, and like I feel very grateful that we have that. But yeah, like, I mean, it's funny when we have conversations with places and they're talking about like theaters, and I just like double take. I'm just like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, what theaters are we talking about? Like, I did Save Yourselves a couple years ago. We thought we were gonna have this big theatrical run. COVID happened, and like I saw that kind of go a very different direction. And I'm still so happy with that movie. But like at that point we were so like theaters, and now I'm just like, no, like we should maybe not try to do that, because like maybe it will just be that 1 month that there's a surge and everything shuts down and then your movie gets buried. And like, is that a good thing? I don't know. Like, it's funny how different it's flipped in the last like 2 years of that. And then, yeah, I mean, what Nikkia said, the production thing, I was telling a filmmaker this yesterday, we were talking about private equity and raising financing for an indie film. And they brought up like they didn't want to go to studios and they didn't want to go to, big places. They just wanted to find like private equity. And I was like, yeah, but what you don't realize is like the Hulus and those places now are technically like the new private equity, because like they are physically just doing production now, and they are physically putting teams together and making the films from the beginning. And the actual idea that you're going to like sell it to Netflix, I mean, Netflix bought like nothing. Like if you're going to sell it to Netflix, it's like, it's probably not going to happen anymore. Like that doesn't really exist. Like maybe 1 or 2 will squeak through. Docs, I think, is a very different space. But like for narrative, it's kind of like puzzle pieces now. It's like a little different. So I don't know. I feel like I'm learning more and more about it every day, but it's
a good point. There was a critic who tweeted something about, wow, it's kind of surprising that Sundance, or Netflix really hasn't picked anything up. I'm like, no, it's not. It's every year their acquisitions have gone down and down and down because they're producing more of their own stuff. Like, yeah. No surprise at all.
Yeah.
Sabrina,
it's not like 5 years ago, whenever they were like, Netflix bought everything. It's like, but we did that 5 years ago. Like that hasn't happened in a long time. Like Amazon, like all of them, like they all changed a couple years ago, and we just keep thinking it's going to go backwards, but it's like not.
And also it's very odd to me to have so many films come in with distribution from a streamer that are then going on a virtual platform. Like you would have, in many ways, a better experience premiering those films on their actual platform. So
I thought the same thing. I'd see the Amazon logo and I was like, wouldn't you have a bigger premiere just like doing it on Amazon? Like that's crazy. You picked Sundance. Like why?
But in person, I understand it, right? It's a buzz generator. It's a sort of a different experience, and like
it's a launch.
It's a launch, which every festival has a section of films that have distributors, and that's like the launch pad, and you get the reviews and you have a different kind of exposure, and I totally get that. But yeah, you're watching it on your television the same way you would watch it on their platform, and that's just like then everyone can see. I mean, like even virtually, I would be like, what do I want to see? Okay, well, that film's going to be on Amazon or Netflix or whatever next week. So like, I don't need a ticket to that.
Well, but it's frustrating because the information is kind of buried in the post too. So like, unless you're aware, you have to look at the PR contacts or the EPs to know. And I find it very deceiving. And I think we're at a time now where that should just stop. Like there should just be no more Netflix premieres at these big festivals. I'm sorry, that's my point of view. Sabrina, do you want to jump in?
No, I mean, I want to echo what everything everyone said, especially around everything feels slower. And my understanding with most of the projects that I know that have distribution was the sale happened before Sundance. So I think that also adds to the feeling of like, it feels like just a little bit like walking in molasses, like you're just, it's just slow. And I think the point Amanda just made about like having a bigger premiere if you just waited, just did it on your own, the Amazon platform or Netflix or whatever, I think is interesting and also speaks to the ways in which I think we will, if we're doing virtual festivals, the way in which we think about audience building. Like I will probably reserve like audience, audience building for like Sundance, for example, like around industry, like industry contacts and things like that, and wait for it to premiere on Netflix or Amazon or whatever to invite my uncle. You know what I mean? Because like, why do they need to have to deal with like the 5-hour window and the this and the that and do it on Sundance, on the Sundance platform, even though like you feel like, well, Sundance, it's like, it's the big one, but I just don't think that translates for every audience. So I think you would think about audience, like in-person audience one way, virtual audience a different way, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, and I should add too, Keith, I think that is actually really good insight about like winter festivals, about where they should happen. Because one thing, I went to our virtual, like on the spaceship party, and it turns out one of the folks that like help you like at the on the platform said like, yeah, no one's going into the actual rooms for the party. They're all just hanging out at the bar. So we're like, okay. So we just hung out at the bar and just ran into random people. And one of the things that came up a few times is that the folks in LA were having a different experience because they were getting together in person. And so they were getting that sort of satisfaction that those of us like, like me in New York, it just felt really like solitary and anticlimactic and those different kinds of things. So I think that is actually a real good insight for winter festivals to like just reimagine them in this way, because it's probably not going to be like just a go back to normal, like COVID never happened,
No, it's time. It's time for change. Did everyone jump in? I lost track on this question. Well, if we stay for a few more minutes, I want to just kind of wrap up with a non-COVID, everything ends up being about COVID, like a non-COVID, non-festival kind of question, which is aside from this big pivot in premiere, I would love if each of you could just talk about like what you think was the most unique challenge in producing this particular film compared to any other films that you've produced, and kind of how did you tackle that change? And we're going to leave out this whole festival nonsense and just making the film. Keith, do you want to start us off? You want another minute? I can always
I mean, if somebody can jump in, maybe they can go. That's a hard, I think I'm still so in it.
That's why I didn't give you the question in advance. I didn't want, Amanda, do you want to jump in?
Sure, but I have to talk about COVID. I'm sorry.
Because
it was such a big part of making
yours
this movie.
Yeah, you're right.
Because we had 2 weeks left to go when the world shut down, and so we shut down for 357 days before we got back to shoot the 2 weeks, and we lost an actress in the meantime that we had already shot with. Because commitments change over a year, and people book work. And so we had to like go back, and like locations had renovated. And so we had to go back and shoot scenes that in locations that had looked very different from when we did it before. So it changes the way that you shoot. And now you have the COVID protocols and everything. And I feel really lucky that we did get back at all, because there's always a chance that you just don't. And I know people whose films didn't get back to finish, so I feel really lucky. But we had a whole year off in between, and that was obviously very difficult. We used the time to like actually look at the footage and figure out what worked and what didn't. So when we went back, we could make adjustments, which is a blessing that I kind of wish I always had. Like I wish I always had a natural break. I've had a couple of films that took natural breaks in editorial, including Diary of a Teenage Girl, and I feel like it actually benefits a movie to take a break during post if you can, and just don't touch it and then go back to it. But yeah, like that was definitely like trying to regroup after a year and still dealing with insurance claims, etc. Has been the biggest challenge with this movie. Like, just can you get all those pieces back? And I feel lucky that we did, but that was really hard.
Yeah. Ina, do you want to jump in?
I mean, you know, COVID, I mean, we didn't shoot very much during this film, so those kinds of concerns were not ours. But if I'm going to talk about making an archive-based film, which is something that, you know, I think there have been a number of articles during the festival and even in the last year, because many of us have done this and do this, there is a challenge telling stories in that way, finding a way to make it engaging and emotional. And I think that I just want to shout out to my team and to others who attempt to make films based on found footage or stock footage or whatever you want to call it. Kudos to that, because it's a very it's challenging to make films that are based on footage only, and you're not controlling what's in that imagery. So I think that for us, having a very strong team of editors and writers and EPs to help navigate this process was really illuminating for me. I've made films with archives before, but it's never been 100% archival. And again, I know I'm not talking about COVID or festivals or anything, but I'm talking about a genre of films that I think, you know, people are appreciating more and more.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some of those articles of archives, the new thing, because they always want to grasp on. Keith, you ready?
I'm ready now. So I think for me, one of the biggest, if not the biggest challenge was actually the pivot from not being in Sundance to being in Sundance. So before that, it was before we found out and got the Zoom call. We were a small team, an EP, editor, director, me, and I was very protective and conscious of the creative process and like didn't show a lot of people, and we were very tight and sort of had a very solid working relationship. And then Sundance happened. I had to hire 20 people. You know, I had to find an AP. We had to find just like staff up so quickly. And so for me, it changed my relationship to the project and just like our dynamics a little bit. And this is my third feature and the second one that's been in Sundance. And I wasn't quite ready or have the skills, or I was terrified also to like, I remember I just had this like, I was terrified that I was going to drop the ball for like 48 hours afterwards. I was like, oh shit, like what? And then I felt a little bit like that when we had to pivot to online too. It's just like, what? So that was something. And when I have another film in Sundance, I feel like I have a better grasp of like what needs to happen in that really important week, 2 weeks after at least we found out, in terms of getting publicists, sales, stuff like that.
Kara, you want to jump in?
Sure. I don't know. I honestly think it was the movie itself, like not in a bad way, but the movie it's like a mockumentary / narrative. It tonally rides like a very interesting line. It was like first time director, first time financier, first time producers. Like we had like a lot of firsts. So I think it was a bit of like, I don't think I'm that experienced, but I was like, oh, I'm more experienced. Like I knew more. And like, I didn't know that I knew more until I was there. But I definitely felt like it was a team of people who were so passionate about the project and so excited to be on it. And also all of us were just like, do we know what we're doing? And like trying to figure it out the best we could. And, you know, tonally, it's an odd one, but like, I hope I never make a movie that's ever been seen before. Like, I hope I don't have a movie that someone's like, oh, it's like this movie, because that would be such a boring experience. So I'm really proud of it. But yeah, I mean, COVID, it's all the things everyone else has said. Sundance, it's all of it.
Sabrina?
Yeah, so for me, I have to say, we don't have to talk about COVID and Sundance, but do have to talk about COVID, especially for our film.
I tried.
No, because it totally changed everything for us. So to just give some context, you know, we had done we were in pre-production and 2018 and even 2019, we did a little shooting like in the fall of 2019, but our production phase began like end of February, beginning of March of 2020. And we had mapped out an entire year of shooting and storyline and events and things. And for those of you who know about the film, it is about like political actions and things like that. So there were a lot of very specific things that were planned by our protagonists that were going to happen over the course of the year. All of that changed March 13th or whatever it was. And so we had to reimagine the film and the filming process. And as our protagonists had to figure out their strategy that they had already planned for a whole year. So I think that was really, I think the biggest change, because again, we had to reimagine everything. And then adding to that we had 4 main characters, and they're in different locations, and they're doing different things. AOC is one of our, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is one of our protagonists. And it's already challenging to film with her now that she is in Congress, which is different from, this is also like, to contextualize again, this is like the sequel to like Knock Down the House in certain kinds of ways, where she was a candidate. So I think that was a very different level of access and freedom than she has now. So that added to like the challenge, because every shoot with her was a negotiation with people outside of her, and had to be vetted through certain like rules and regulations of what she can and cannot do and things like that. So adding, COVID and having to rethink like what we were going to do with her and with and also the other 3 young women, what we planned to film, that was just extraordinary. And then when you think about too that like it's a film about the fight for the Green New Deal, about like policy. So already we're like thinking out, trying to make sure that we're thinking about it in such a way that we're telling the story that it doesn't get bogged down in kinds of in policy or wonkiness, and want to make sure that you're telling a film that is propelling itself forward and has drama and all of those different kinds of things. So that was quite a lift. I remember when with Rachel and I over the course of the year, like planning these shoots and things like that, it was almost like really a leap of faith, because it was like, well, all we could shoot was this. And every time it was like, all we could shoot was that. And then next thing you know, you're like, wow, wait a minute, I think we might have a movie. So like there was a way which I felt that even more than like and you always feel a little bit of that with documentaries, but with this one, it was really because we were just trusting that we like with every pivot, with everything that we could get or things that we had to give up or that didn't happen anymore. Like we just had to keep trusting that we were going to land in a good place. So it was a definitely big leap of faith and trust in what we were doing. Feeling a little, yeah.
Nikkia, you want to bring it home?
I think the hardest thing or the biggest challenge on this one was the schedule that we honestly set out for ourselves. We're to blame. There's no one else outside of us, but I don't know many projects that quite had a schedule like ours. So we Kara, I think maybe you did a film like ours, but like we never got shot down because of COVID, by the way, but we shot in the middle of the summer when everyone decided to shoot their films, at least in New York, and so it just affected everything, finding our department heads, finding our cast, even the way we had to set up our shooting schedule was very much tethered to, the dates we needed, like what we needed versus what locations could offer us. Like it was just such a puzzle at every step of the way. And, my director is so ready for the challenge, but I think, being a considerate producer, if I could have done it all over again, I just wish we had had more time. And, it doesn't help when you actually like cross the threshold, because then your partner's like, good job, great, okay, on to the next. Now we're going straight into post and you did so good. So like keep it, it was such a catch-22. And then when you get into the festival and then you have to continue and push through post, so I think I'd never do this again, especially not with a first timer. I think to Nikkia's credit, we would have never crossed the threshold if she wasn't who she was, but like we made the schedule and then we had to hit it. So that was the toughest part of Nanny.
I'm starting a new indie and I haven't shot an indie for a couple years. I've been doing TV and I generally forgot like how hard it is. It is so hard to make a movie, and congratulate all of you for getting this far. Is there anything on someone's mind that they want to say that I haven't asked, or it could be off topic, on topic? Just want to make sure. There's a lot of you, so you didn't get to talk all that much, but I wanted a lot of opinions today. So
to piggyback on what Nikkia just said,
yeah,
we don't have to do them that late.
No.
Like every year, everyone is always like, well, you did that movie last year at that time and you did Sundance. And I'm always like, but it wasn't fun. Like that was hard. It was like not enjoyable. Like we could just do a month earlier and it would be so much better and easier for the film. So I just want to say that because I feel like people always quote that as like, so-and-so shot in July and they're fine. And I'm like, but that's not the way to make a movie. It's so hard.
Well, and everyone's running towards a Sundance deadline. And so people have said it in the chat. And I think we really, I've worked at Sundance, I've been a fellow, I've had films but I think we really need to evaluate kind of chasing this golden ticket, because it permeates into everything. And it shouldn't be the only avenue for movies. It's one amazing avenue, but it shouldn't be the only one for our films. Anything else, anybody? Well, thank you for all being here. I could talk to you for hours, but it's a Saturday and we appreciate you coming out at the end of the festival, but I'm sure your brains are fried. It's great to get producers' point of view on this. And I will post the replay. And I think actually, we should share this with all of our festival friends who run festivals, because I think this is an important conversation for them to hear. I certainly will make sure it gets in front of the Sundance folks that I'm friends with. So thank you guys for being here. Enjoy the last weekend of your festival, and congrats to all of you on your amazing films.
And thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congrats,
for doing this.
everybody.
Yes,
Congratulations.
everyone.
fun.
Bye.
Bye.
Like,
Bye.